All right. Hello and welcome to the 59th Radical Poetry Reading. I'm Malva Kajali, Special Projects Associate here at The Rail, and today I have the great honor of welcoming you to our tribute for poet, translator, and dear friend Jack Hirschman, who passed away too soon this past August. We're joined today by poets, friends, and family, and poets and friends who are family, Agneta Falk, Celia Hirschman, Andrei Codrescu, Tongo Eisen-Martin, Pierre Joris, Elaine Katzenberger, Devorah Major, Gail Mitchell, Alejandro Murguia, and Luis Rodriguez. And they are joined today by the esteemed literary chronicler and living historian of the Beat generation, Neely Cherkovsky. A few quick notes before we get started. Firstly, here in New York, we're on Lenapehoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wapinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and the Shinnecock Indian Nation. Part and parcel of this acknowledgement is the continued recognition that Black lives matter and that when it comes to our liberation, our histories never unfold in isolation. Secondly, here at The Rail, we're celebrating our 21st anniversary by working on our first ever endowment campaign, which will ensure the continuity of the print edition of The Rail alongside our public programming and other cross-pollinations and adventures into the arts, humanities, and sciences. We're hoping to keep those funded and free for generations to come. So in that spirit, we encourage you to check out the chat, where I'll drop some resources, links, and other goodies. But now it's my honor to welcome our wonderful host, Neely Cherkovsky. Neely is a poet, memoirist, editor, and literary chronicler. His latest books of poetry are Hang on the Yangtze River, which came out with Lithic Press just this past pandemic year, and Elegy for My Beat Generation, which also came out with Lithic Press in 2018. He's the biographer of Charles Bukowski and Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and the recipient of an American Book Award and the Josephine Miles PEN Award. Neely, the mic is yours.
Wow, thank you. Okay, this is Jack. Here's one version of Jack. If I can get how come this isn't shown? Oh, there it is. There, that's Jack Hirschman by Momo in North Beach, and there's a Jack. There's a Ginsberg, Gregory Corso. They're fabulous, and this is the book that influenced me way back in the late '60s, early '70s. Black Olives by Jack Hirschman. With a cover by the great Wallace Berman. And I'm going to read a poem from that. And this is my own latest book called The ABCs. And halfway through, there's a dedication at the beginning for somebody. And then I was completing this book when Jack died. And so the second half of the book is dedicated to my good friend and colleague, Jack Hirschman. So, when somebody dies, of course, it seems to always be a surprise. It's always the wrong time, and it's always the person you don't think was going to pass. Jack Hirschman was supposed to always be there, be available. I need another email. We had wild email exchanges. Luckily, the last email he sent me was, Neely, sometimes you get it. Because let me tell you, a lot of the emails, there was one email a couple of times before that. He said, I like this poem, but you have KKK in the last line, 3 Ks, and that's Ku Klux Klan. And he really was upset. And then he has one, you better come to the reading or you're in trouble. And he meant it, so, but anyway, it's a 54 years friendship. 1967 at my college in Los Angeles, I heard about this great professor at UCLA, and I invited him to come across town to my school, and we paid him an enormous sum for that day, $35. And he came to read, and every time Jack read a poem, he took the paper and crumpled it up and threw it on the ground. I thought, oh, this guy's great. He really fits the description I heard about him. And then a few years later, he moved up to San Francisco, and I followed a few years later, and we sort of had what I call the University of Jack Hirschman in the Cafe Trieste. And in 1974 and 75, we were studying the Russian futurists, and we all got to know Mayakovsky and Klebnikov and on. And he even talked about You know, he did his PhD thesis at Indiana University on Finnegan's Wake. He even talked about that. And I remember him the first time he read his favorite poem, Sailing to Byzantium by Yeats. Little things about Jack Hirschman you may not know. And it was an experience. And then we went on and did so many poetry readings, and we resurrected Beatitude magazine that had been founded in 1959 by Bob Kaufman. It was a great moment in North Beach because there was Jack and there was Bob Kaufman, and Gregory Corso showed up, and of course there's Lawrence, and it was a gift to those of us who back then we were younger, believe it or not, and it was a great gift because we had this older generation that was so open and so open-hearted, and Jack probably the most exuberant of them all. And if I learned one thing from Jack, it was exuberance and to try to practice generosity, as he was probably among the most generous persons I've ever known. And you can take that to the bank, you know. Excuse me, Jack. Last thing you think about is taking anything to the bank. I'm going to read a poem of his, and it might be a little hard because of the lighting here. It's called Balaban. I don't know if any of you know it. It's in the book Black Olives, and it's about his childhood. Jack was born and raised in the Bronx, and he never left the Bronx in the sense of the street lingo and all that, and the way he talked. He really had the accent of the streets, you know. Balaban. I ran down the street and into the house, smelled of oregano and shook Mickey Monaco, said, "Come on, Balaban's got a bread loaf." Climbing over old Gruber's fence, he thinks the mad dogs is doves. But Mickey grew up in the bed till he was too old. And besides, Balaban was crazy. He sucked his tongue and got left back twice. So I ran to Joey Bellino's house, but his mother's black stocking said Joey was out early shoe shining. And besides that, Balaban, he's a crazy a kid. He's suck of the tongue. And Joey says he got left back 3 times. So I banged on Bitsy Beller's window, yelled he was near the top. The mad dog's waiting down below, he thinks his doves. But when Bitsy stood up, he turned into a stiff cue stick and didn't want anything to do with nobody crack upstairs. And Dickie Miller became a semi-pro, and Howie Fish a doctor. So I ran down the street full of hope by myself because I was on fire. But I got there too late for Balaban. 2 of them had a stretch of skin between their teeth, fighting over it. And the foam of their mouths and Balaban's blood spattered in such a way, the greatest picture looked me straight in the eye, made me sit in the gutter and cry. And when I got up, vowed to be Balaban from that day on. So that's Jack's great poem. And so we're going to move right on, and the next reader will be the permanent Romanian exile, the wonderful Andrei Codrescu. Hey.
Thank you, Neely. There's no such thing as an impermanent exile. Once an exile, always one. I think I met Jack in San Francisco in the early 70s, mid 70s. I think about the same time you were there as well. It was a very energetic scene, poetry scene there, and Jack's arrival made it electric because he was one of the first poets I knew who was first a professor, then he became a poet, a real poet of the streets in North Beach. And because at the time there are some, as I remember, poet professors, but not, and then later they became professor poets. But Jack gave all that up, and we met. I knew some of his work. I respected it. I loved it. And but we had a constant disagreement about Joseph Stalin, who for some reason Jack insisted that Stalin was a good for the world and Russia, and me, freshly exiled from communist Romania, thought that you know, it was amazing to even mention that genocidal maniac in a positive light. So we had this kind of ongoing little dialogue that was not, sometimes it sounded serious on his part, and sometimes, you know, it was, we both understood that it was a kind of a addition to what we were doing. In his case, surrealism and Kabbalism and Stalinism. And in that note, I'm going to read a poem of Jack's, which is new, and in which he seems to give up, well, I don't know how new it is, this whole Stalinist idea. And then one that is a response that I had to it, you know, it contains, it says, it's called All That's Left. All that's left in the world, whether in Cuba, Venezuela, Bolivia, as well as in China, Japan, the United States, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, all of them cannot, despite the resistance, despite the refusal, stop this march of death, because they, as well as all that's right in the world, despite the refusal, despite the resistance, already are counted among those in the last parade. Communists and progressives, Nazis, fascists and reactionaries, Zionists and anarchists of every stripe, none are excluded. None can evade the march. This one's not coming with hammer and sickles or swastikas or flags of any land. This one's the march all wars surrender to. But when comes the unanimous cry? When will it really happen? If death is peace, when can I truly die? You will never know, and yet you do, because you may already have. And this life is your way of paying homage to the power that loves you enough to have taken your life away and left you with a taste of immortality on your lips. Nothing mystical, no Christ, Allah, Jave, or Buddha in the wings. Even lying on your back, you're marching. This is not a cynical or pessimist or nihilist poem. Join death in your life, and you'll live as if there were no drum to march to. And then I thought, well, what exactly is this death that doesn't have an ism attached to it? And then I wrote this sort of little prose response. Just before, actually, I read that poem, but it seems to be a perfect thinking about that death. Dear Meat, what is your point? Yes, you're ahead of your time when you presented your dystopia to the class, but nobody applauded. That was 100 plus years ago. It was hubris. It was the same hubris that propels you now, but it is no longer prescience or vision. It is just kvetch. Your body got there along every other body, though yours is experiencing extreme ennui. Been there in my mind. There is a bittersweet quality to retrovisionary ennui. If anything, one-way meat was always planned obsolescence. Look at me now. I move, I sing, I fuck, and I feel no pain. And I don't have just one body. I have many of every sex, color, and dimension. What do you mean it doesn't smell? See that little icon of a huffing nose with expanded nostrils on the right side of your screen? Push it, and the effluvia menu pops up. Smell to die for wafts out. You're in the bubble bath of infinity, smelling like a rare orchid or a vile cabbage turd. When you had your meat body, you never had such olfactory possibilities. Here are 1 million orgasms impossible in meat space. That has been abolished. When you move into the virtual world, you don't need much. No clothes, no furniture, no shoes, no school. You simply walk into the blindingly white screen holding your tablet. When meat dies, the memory of you stays behind within the meat memory of those who knew you. They will soon follow, tablets clutched like genitals at an army physical. When your meat body dies, you won't. There will be enough copies to eliminate the embarrassment of regret. As a copy reaches another copy, there is no need for tears. I am you. Our lives, as narrated by engineers, are still unsophisticated now. They will get better when bots understand neurally how we think. My first reality replacement was the light switch in our apartment. I turned it on and it wasn't night anymore. I lived with that all my meat life, keeping two realities in mind simultaneously. It was night and it was day. Two, it was dark and it was light at the same time. The reality replacing machine made things interesting. For animals, it is always dark at night, unless they live with us. There is no such thing as an avant-garde body, only a mind located in meat. Suicide is the only avant-garde. With the flesh gone, we live forever. Now, not sure that's the particular that he was referring to, but it's the one that's coming along with immortality. Thanks. I can hear you, Neely, but that's, yeah.
I was muted there for a minute. Andrei, I was going to say, Jack was fascinated by Stalin's mustache. And I think that's about it. I think, look at Jack's mustache, and we would argue in the same way for 5 decades. Anyway, moving on, the next poet, Tongo Eisen-Martin, is the current poet laureate of our fair city of San Francisco. And I think he still lives on Andover Street, the same as I do. And I've been trying to get him back here to have a espresso, but it hasn't happened yet. But he's a really great poet. I was reading New York Review of Books the other day, and there was a poem of his right there. It was great with all the heavy duty articles in that magazine. And he just had some poems in the Brooklyn Rail. So Tongo.
Thank you very much. Much love to everyone. I have some poems of Jack's that I'd like to read, but first I just wanted to say, and this is kind of hard to explain, and definitely hard to explain in the morning, but wordplay is play, right? And what is there's kind of an invincibility that reveals itself through the kind of humorous potentials of a line, regardless of how how dangerous the content of that line. As a result, you will find poets laughing at lines that may, and it might be imperceptible to some ears, but they're laughing appropriately, because there is that kind of almost the chuckle of invincibility that is that is evoked or invoked, whichever, by what the other poet is doing. And Jack had the most beautiful chuckle I've ever heard in my life, that would really serve as almost a home for you to return to as you're saying your poems. Again, this is hard to kind of relate, but they're when you're up there kind of hanging on for dear life, sometimes you can feel like all ground is gone, and that you're not really being, you're not really going to be understood, and Jack would be there with that beautiful chuckle that I miss so much, that would instantly just kind of provide housing. Be on the microphone. It really reflects, you know, just a kind of actually almost reflects a mind that he surrendered to the mass imagination. And that's where that invincibility is, to kind of to let go of your personal territory and just give your, you know, give your imagination really to the historical process, is a beautiful and pretty singular thing. So here are a few poems from Jack. Like Onto. What comes out of the cool blue of a sky needs reaffirming and resonant to years before it was dirtied up by hoods of the clux-headed, death-headed sort, as well as hoods of the criminal state of things now, when a brother, part of brotherhood, out of the, or certainly when, blue in the cool dawned with warm words ringing true among human beings, developing one me, thus you. When I was in the council chambers of the big city, the mouths of the council members opening and coming down on the fat sandwiches that had been delivered to their places, coming down and chewing and leaning over, talking with half-stuffed mouths or heads thrown back, laughing, their bellies chortling, and all the while one after another homeless person stood not far from them, but far enough from them before a microphone requesting help for their most basic human wounds, protesting against a syndrome without alternatives except for Skid Row hotels or concentration camps in the downtown desert. When I saw the indifference of this system physically manifested by those pigs of local government, I thought, it can't be quick enough that they're led to the sty they belong in. It can't be quick enough that they're forcibly removed from the people's chambers and replaced by human animals who at least can smell the heartbreak and the enduring dignity of the American people. Those pigs are worse than the rottenest blue pork at the bottom of garbage can Los Angeles. Hungry men and women never should have to be subjected to their poisonously filthy mold. Who cares? But the nothingness he meant, which now is planetary, isn't negative, rather an aperture, an opening to the other side of actual self, to the process of hearing light, not unlike yourself when you bring all that in your everyday seems drifting, ever more ungraspable and transient, where all values beyond money seem rootless and on the wane. Bring them along with your crumpled body in the darkness and afterward, because sex is of the animals and the stars, and is in fact happily the animals and the stars. Find that point outside of the window, ancient grit of wall or tree or lichen, and gaze at it, enthralled, fixed, as if nothing were ever so radiant, meditative, informative, attuned, like a computer window in a world of cybernetics, he said, speaking of the future some 30-odd years ago, of this visual listening to light just below the surface of things, this planetary all in you, constructed of holocaust and ecstasies, the snail's inch and the worker's steel, demonstrators and monotonies, golem and robot opens to receive most stumbly, hungrily, desolately, authentically, sounds from deep within the wilding stillness. And there, when 5 small human bones tug at your sleeve of skin, the question mark falls away, and you know who cares. Poet's 11 poem. Between the page with the heart and mind wrestling upon it, and the ear which later will receive those limbs of light as perfect harmony, there's a stillness whose volume speaks worlds of words defiant of measure, treasures of the unsayable secrets of the ever-beginning enchantment and the never-ending gathering at the lips of the kiss of the poem.
How we doing? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, brilliant.
Okay, because it says unmute. Okay, so I did want to say in the midst of all this, thank you again to the Brooklyn Rail for these wonderful tributes, to Lawrence Ferlinghetti, to Diane, and now to Jack, and all the wonderful things you've done. A lot of people obviously will only know Jack Hirschman through his writing. I shouldn't say only, but that's how they will know Jack Hirschman, through his writing, through memoirs, through his voice and all that. We knew him as a person, as a friend, whether it's a chuckle, whether it's arguing about Stalin or whatever. It's just amazing to me. And so we know him in multitudinous ways. And the Rail has given us another way. So all people out there listening in, I hope you immediately go out and buy a Hirschman book. So the next reader is a dear friend and the soulmate, the life mate of Jack Hirschman, Agneta Falk, and you can find her, or you could find her many days at a table in front of the Cafe Trieste in North Beach, having her spritzer and a cigarette, and and then rushing home to write or whatever she's doing. And so it's been a amazing, difficult time, and Aggie is now in the process of just helping to preserve Jack's legacy and to make sure all his work gets out there to the public while doing her own wonderful poetry. So Agneta.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. But just nearly, I think I gave up spritzers about 8 years ago. And I haven't been in front of cafeterias maybe for 3 years. But otherwise, everything is correct. I'm not going to talk very much about, well, I'm going to say I first met Jack in 1980 when he came to stay with me and then my partner Asa Benvenisti, the late poet, publisher of Trigram Press, Asa Benvenisti. And Jack always said that Asa was the one who put the finger on him. Many, many years later, I invited Jack to a festival in England. This was after Asa had passed. And the rest is history. I'm going to read one of my favorite poems by Jack, and then I'm going to read just a little one that I wrote to Jack many years ago. Mother. We are not in this world a long time ago. It happened, it was over. The world, the war, the world war. I took you by the hand through it. Tiniest hand, tiniest star. You didn't move then. I was dead. Then you were dead. In the open mouth of grief, there is a candle. I'm not with my breath. And the slow peeling away of the skin and all the death I've seen registers in my eyes. I've been a laughing tree beside a stove of honeyed bananas. I've been a silver fox and the elegance of heels. I've been what has brought you down and the words you look up. I've been the spit upon and the ganged, the slain and the invincible, the bitch of the moons, the whiplash of compassion behind the drugs of sluts, the red thread that liberates the old convicts, the thimble that balanced your jiggers, the kalimba that wraps your nightmares in lullabies, the power of birth when a child dies. We are not in this world. A long time ago it happened, it was over. The world, the war, the world war. I took you by the hand through it. Tiniest hand, tiniest star. Why should I weep? No, now. that you have entered the darkness. Many like me are around you. Our ether is without end. And should we never speak again, you shall write our conversation. And should your voice fall short of your heart, but that is impossible. You're still such a child. I'm weeping at the window, and other voices will lift mine and carry it into the center of your breathing. Oh, my beloved, when you burst into flames, when your bones were blistered at those precise moments, who drove the seeds in a rapid torrent of thighs and targeted the yearning eggs with glory? When you grew like a primer into a text of rage at all the injustice of this profiteering hell, when your mind was broken, when your sex was split like Korea, Vietnam, like the North and South, when poisons came with pleasure and the antidote was dead. Who cut through the air as if wringing a chicken's neck? Who tore the feathers and flung them to cushion your fall? I am the created who runs through the streets screaming your name against the mockery. I am the sleep of the suicide and the cataracts of immemorial hair. I'm the attack of liberty on the heart of heart and the poem on the heart of hearing, the solitude, the grace, the smile that returns your smile from the depth of biology, of labor and joy. Only the heartless of the Ditheram approach, only the soul thrums of the cosmos define. We are not in this world. A long time ago it happened, it was over. The world, the war and the world war. I took you by the hand through it, tiniest hand, tiniest star. It's such a beautiful poem. I mean, it's so, and I'm going to read two poems, very short, that I wrote to Jack in 1995 when we were parted for a while, but I feel it's as if I could almost have written them yesterday. The first one's called Autumn Song. The days grow hoarse. The colors of autumn will soon die in the frost. Time has passed, gentle beast. What remains is a silhouette of your laughter, the deep joy slowly gathering in the vestibule for the final kiss. Yet I wait for I don't know what, and hope the words that burn in my throat will catch a wind and fly with you. And then finally, this is a book I actually gave him for his birthday in 1996. So they're all poems to Jack. To the room. I said to the room, I love you, Jack, and wrapped your name around me tight, glowing in the warmth with not a care in the world, letting go of you, knowing you would live on inside me in every move and gesture I make, the way I sit at a table or color my days, knowing that in an autumn leaf I can touch you, conjure you up in stone walls from here to far. So I said to the room, set me free to love this way. Let me fly with a touch of earth on my feet so that my heart can flutter in peace.
Nice, beautiful. Thank you, Aggie.
Thank you.
Okay, so um, the next reader is Jack's daughter. He had two children, Celia and David. And I think I first met Celia, she was probably 7 or 8 years old in Los Angeles when Jack and Ruth Hirschman had a cottage on Venice Beach, and Jack was at UCLA. So Celia was also at the wonderful event we had about a month and a half ago at Washington Square Park in North Beach, there were about 300 people honoring Jack, and there have been readings all over the world. I just heard about one the other day for Jack in northern Italy, and there's one happening in Salerno very shortly. There have been two or more readings in Beijing and certainly in Latin America. So Celia.
Thank you very much, Neely, and thank you, Brooklyn Rail, for putting this together with Neely. Let me say a few things about Jack. I feel like one of the most special people in the world to have him as my father. He was, as Neely said, incredibly generous. And as a child, he spent most of my childhood in his studio after he taught at UCLA and gave that up, Dartmouth and IU. And so I had the privilege of hanging out with him a lot. And he had the privilege of teaching me a lot about people, about love. And we used to go hitchhiking all over LA, him 6'3" and super skinny, and me very, very small and tow-haired. And we would do It Happened One Night hitchhiking, and with a little pool cue box, traveling all over LA. And I have really amazing memories of Jack. When I was 10 years old, he presented me with this book that is an accordion. And I'd like to read it to you. It's not long. It's another side of Jack that you may not have seen, although the side that you've seen already. Once upon a time ago, a story for Celia. Dear Celia, it is time for me to tell you a story. Come into the bed, lie down over here to my left. There, now, that is much better. Here comes Simon the cat. He is climbing up your leg. Now he is sitting on your stomach. He wants to hear the story also. The name of the story is Once Upon a Time Ago, the End Happened to the Princess What? That's a pretty long title for a story that must fit into only a few small pages in a pretty small book, but we shall see just what happens to the Princess What. Once upon a time ago, there was a small kingdom no bigger than a postage stamp, and in it could be seen a castle and a sky and a tree and a little girl who was sitting underneath it eating an apple, whose name was naturally Princess What. Now there is a stream also, and it's running alongside the standing tree and the sitting princess, and this stream is called Once Upon a Time Ago, the End, because that's the sound it makes when it runs along. Simon purrs so softly, isn't it so? Well, the pretty Princess What was just about to take a bite of the apple underneath the tree when the stream crawled up out of itself and lay down at the feet of the Princess What. She was pretty surprised, but not all that surprised, because she had once seen the old mountain get out of his big shoes and go walking in a field of cows, and that had been really surprising. Nevertheless, she asked the stream, would he mind moving over so she should not get wet? The stream, who was very old, though he insisted on acting young all the time, complied. He moved a little away so the Princess What could go on eating her apple. When she had finished, however, and had thrown the apple core over her shoulder, she grew lonely. She looked back at her home, the castle, and it looked lonely. She looked up at the tree with its bare sticks of branches, and it too looked lonely. The Princess What suddenly felt that everything in the world was lonely, just like herself. Then she looked down at the stream. He looked lonelier than ever before, and everyone, but he was nonetheless playing with a blade of grass between his teeth. The princess what said, Stream, why don't you come up over here now and tell me a story, for I am lonely, and it does not matter that I shall get wet. The stream was overjoyed, and as he crawled up beside the princess what, he assured her that she would not get wet at all. He lay down beside her on the slope, and Simon the cat, who was the princess what's friend, came by and climbed up onto the stream's belly because he too wanted to hear the story. The stream said, this is the story he would tell. It was called Once Upon a Time Ago, the end happened to the princess what? He then simply told the story in a way I never could, because he knew everything before it happened, even the end. And when he was finished, the princess folded the story into 4 parts and put it into an envelope that she was always carrying, and put the postage stamp that had the castle and the tree and the apple core on it. And she took it to the post box and mailed it to me to tell. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm on, the machine is acting up. So not me, it's a machine. So the next person I'm going to introduce, well, you know, Pierre Joris, I have to say, everybody knows Jack translated so much. And I was really excited when he called me several months ago and he said, I'm translating Yitzhak Katz-Nelson, who was killed in the camps. He was a victim of the Nazis, and he wrote this great poem for the murdered Jewish people. The last major translation Jack did after translating all over the world, French, German, Creole, Spanish, everywhere, was Yiddish. This is a language he heard quite a bit in the Bronx as a child, although it was not spoken in his house, but he heard it on the streets and from neighbors. And that was real exciting to me, and it was very important to Jack that he do that. Well, Jack also loves Paul Celan, and probably surely the greatest translator, interpreter of Paul Celan is Pierre, and just like Jack, he's also a very important, great. I strike the word important. He's a very great poet. I know what an important poet is. He's a very, but he's important to me. So anyway, and now I see, I knew he had this great library. So surrounded by his books, Pierre Joris.
Thank you, Neely. Thank you very much. And indeed, I want to talk a bit about Jack as the translator, of course. My face-to-face meetings with Jack can unhappily be counted on the fingers of 2 hands. We were either on different continents or on different coasts, but that does not mean that we have what the French call des différents. Across the miles, I always felt him to be a compañero of the first order. What I remember most clearly from our meetings is his amazing voice, the warmth, like a wraparound bear hug of his greetings, and the absolute presence of the man, his laser-like focus, be that around a cafe table with a drink in hand or at a poetry reading.
Ooh.
I miss Jack. I first heard of Jack back in 1969 from Clayton Eshelman, who preceded him to the more or less happy hunting grounds by a bare 6 months, and who told me how important Jack had been for him at the university for introducing an ignorant Midwestern boy to poetries from Europe and Latin America, thus starting Clayton's interest in translation. And that is something Jack clearly kept on doing for the rest of his life to innumerable young poets and just plain citizens. No matter any later differences, I can see them now, hanging somewhere in the bar of the great beyond, Clayton sipping a glass of Côte de Nuit, Jack a largish vodka, while the bartender, one Antonin Artaud, will let them know where both were right or wrong in bringing him into English. As an ex-European, I was not as flabbergasted as many Americans when Jack called himself a communist. Among his and my generation in Europe, and the non-Euro Southern world, that claim was normal for any poet, writer, artist worth his or her political salt.
Right, right.
If I riff off that word, communism, I'd go to common, to the commons, those egalitarian places where things and ideas are put in common, shared, free of authoritarian selfish controls from above or below. In our trade, the way this common shows itself is as a field of language, which, says Jack, is the house of being. And in the double dance of poetry and translation on the wide floor of that communal longhouse, as against the egotistical, self-centered ones who spent their lives writing about their own, well, navels and the dirt therein, a poet like Jack not only writes a major opus of outlooking, wide open, world welcoming poetry, but also a major opus of translations, bringing the work of countless poets into the so often benightedly monolingual consciousness of this country. You cannot separate the two activities. They are one and the same élan, because, as I've said elsewhere, language itself is already translation, and thus there is no writing that is not translation. And in the process of this lifelong activity, the single poet's voice becomes a choir, a multitude of voices demanding change. As he wrote in his inauguration address, I believe that translation is undoubtedly one of the most important human dispensations towards making the world a more consciously harmonious ground for brother and sisterhood. We do this because we have to, as he put in one of the Arcanes, we have to put a monkey wrench into the total mobilization of the empire machine. Here is one of Jack's translations, which I included in my anthology of North African literature. It is by the very, very little known poet whom only someone as persistent and focused on a certain socially conscious poetry as Jack could have found, the Algerian poet Ismail Ayit Jafar. And it is from that man's single book, a book from 1951, Wail of the Arab Beggars of the Kasbah.
Whoa.
I would like to break out in rage, in howling arm, raving rage, in a fury like people who know how to rage, by smashing their fists down on tables, breaking them to get what they want. I want to cut loose on account of sweet little Yasmina, who didn't want to die, but who's dead a few days ago on the Rue Franklin Roosevelt. Homi Ahmed is a 42-year-old beggar, but with stomachs full. The children of Charlemagne sing a song they learn at school. Frère Jacques, dormez-vous, ding dong dong. The cold is mute. The cold says nothing. It simply kills people by natural causes. It especially kills poor people who have only mattresses of cardboard to sleep on and wrapping paper with which to cover themselves. When it has a good day, that goddamn current of icy air which freezes every stone and wrapping paper, and who's wrapped in it, twirling and romping on through the arcades of the Rue de la Lyre. Charlemagne, hopscotches from male sleeper to female sleeper, and from the sleeping child to the sleeping old man, and from the tubercular sleeper to the BCG, one, and so on, for 500 yards of cardboard and wrapping paper, and 127 mummified cadavers in the arcades. Before dying, little Yasmina slept there with her little papa, who murdered her, simply, abruptly, with the fatherly pat, and not at all nasty, of a hardworking, conscientious peasant who sows the tiny 9-year-old seed in the furrow on the treads of a big truck passing and grinding by. Here we have, as Diane de Prima put it, Jack Hirschman making the world a better place, whether it likes it or not. Travel well, Jack. You'll always be with us, and we'll keep learning from you.
Bravo, bravo. Thank you so much, Pierre. Thank you. So, yes, I remember when Jack was translating that poem, well, for the Arab beggars of the Kasbah, I mean, he was just transfixed by it. And it's the same way he felt about Artaud in the 60s when he put together that great anthology with David Rattray for City Lights. He would look like Artaud at the time. So yes, we still learn from the University of Jack Hirschman. Jack had a very good relationship with Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and you can well imagine why. Lawrence was another lefty, but he didn't call himself a communist. He was something else. And again, you talk about generosity. One day, about 8 years ago, I was complaining to Jack and Aggie. I said, I haven't had dinner with Lawrence, maybe about 6 years ago, for 30 years. And the next thing I knew, Jesse and I, my partner and I, were invited over to Lawrence's. Aggie made the dinner, and there was the five of us. It was pretty amazing. And to see Jack and Lawrence together was incredible. The last time I saw Jack was a memorial for Lawrence in Bolinas. That was amazing. Jack and I both have our walking sticks, and we're out there, and it was very nice. But so anyway, Jack developed a great relationship with City Lights, and Lawrence published in 1974 Lyripol by Jack, Lyrical Politics, a very great book of poems. And then many years later, they did another book for the Pocket Poet series, and then a book in the Poet Laureate series. And the person who's been running at the head of City Lights for many years now, the heir to the great Nancy Peters and Lawrence Ferlinghetti, is Elaine Katzenberger. And she's the next person to speak about Jack now.
Elaine. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Neely. My experience, my friendship with Jack Hirschman goes back a long way. I've been in North Beach, working in North Beach since 1980. And I don't know that I knew Jack before I started working at City Lights. That was 1987, but I certainly remember him from those years. And it's such a quotidian experience. It's sort of hard to extract the details of something that just lasts for, more than 35 years of just having somebody be in your life in such a natural way. City Lights was like Jack's office. I mean, literally, he'd come and use the copy machine to make whatever manuscripts copies he needed to make, and avail himself of whatever other office supplies he wanted, and say hello to Lawrence if he was there. He was just a almost daily presence if he wasn't traveling. And I have these memories of being a young person and seeing this 50-something-year-old version of Jack in Washington Square Park, shirtless on a warm day, throwing baseballs with somebody, and just being like, who is that guy? And then we all marched through the years. And, at some point, Lawrence and Jack, obviously they were, they butted heads over the years, and they were very close. And there was at one point, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but they both seemed to always sport the same red scarf. And I wondered if they would trade it back and forth sometimes, until I finally saw them together with their own. Jack was really, as everyone else has said, I mean, he was very generous, and he was persistent. And I really, not a month went by during the time that I was the publisher. I've been the publisher at City Lights while Jack would come in, that I wasn't being presented with yet another manuscript by a poet who had to be published, just had to be published. And he was very sincere about his desire to spread the word, and spread the word as deployed by people all around the world. And it was inspiring. Jack was also somebody who liked to tell jokes, and I am somebody who doesn't remember jokes very well, but the one joke I have always remembered was told to me by Jack Hirschman. And in the green room before we started this Zoom, we were talking about Jack as a jokester. So I said, okay, I'll tell the joke because I was thinking about it. It's hard to, hearing people read Jack's poems, it's also, it's hard not to hear Jack's voice. Jack obviously had his own elocution and his delivery. So I won't try to imitate it, but I'll try to give it the spirit that he told. So one day in a big city someplace, there was this guy driving around in a kind of a small beat up car, and he was having a good time, and he had his friends in the car, and they were 8 penguins. And they pulled up to a stoplight, and along came a police cruiser, pulled up next to him, and the cop looks over and takes a double take and says, "Pull over." And when he rolls down the window, he says, "Yes, officer." And he says, "What are you doing with those penguins?" "Well, we're just taking a ride." "You can't drive around with a car full of penguins. You better take those penguins to the zoo right away." "Okay, officer, thank you." Drives off. Couple days go by, same intersection, same car, same guy, full of penguins, 8 penguins in the car. Officer pulls him over and says, "Hey, I thought I told you to take those penguins to the zoo." "Yes, I did. Thank you so much. They enjoyed it a lot. Now we're going to the museum." I've always remembered that joke, and thank you, Jack. I love that joke, and anyone I tell usually likes to laugh at that joke too. So I want to say that also one of the things about Jack was that when someone would pass, whether it was a bartender in North Beach or a famous poet friend, Jack's elegy poems were something that I really always appreciated. And over the years, there were so many of them that would just be printed up on a piece of paper and put in the window of City Lights for the people from North Beach as they went one by one. And Jack's ability to memorialize them was something that I really, it was helpful to me in my loss. And when Lawrence died, obviously that was difficult loss. And I wrote to him right away, or he wrote to me. I don't remember who communicated first, but it was just like, all I ask is the elegy poem. I'm looking forward to that. You'll help me. And he wrote a beautiful poem for Lawrence, which I'm not going to read now, but I do want to read that. So this is one of the books that Lawrence and Jack, I remember them working on this book at City Lights. This book was published in 1992, I think. No, sorry, 2002. 2000. This poem was written in 1992 that I'd like to read now. And it's kind of the closest that I could get to an elegy poem here. So this poem is titled Wildebeest. You said, as we watched an animal being born in Africa, "Isn't it wonderful that one creature literally comes out of the body of another?" About a month later, I thought, and enters the body of the world, grows into living prime, then goes toward death and dies, leaving the world's body. About a month later, I heard, enters the womb of death. So you see, it just goes on and on, entrances, entrancings, and exits that are themselves new entrances. "Who said that?" I cried. The voice of matter, which really never dies, I heard as I tumbled out of my mother. She was happy to see another wildebeest outside, and so, I suppose, was I. Thank you, Jack, for all the good memories.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you so much. So, yes, I like to say when one thing I noticed with Jack, when people died, I mean, he would always call me, and if there was a diminutive to use, he would use it. "Hello, Neely, this is Jack. Kenny died." And that was Ken Wainio, or "Hello, Neely, this is Jack. Johnny died." And I mean, his voice was he was just overcome with grief over all these people leaving us. And yes, he was. You know, I share with. I think maybe I learned from Jack that the poem of Elegy, because in tribute to somebody, as if you could bring them back, and you can't, of course. The next reader is a former poet laureate of San Francisco and a great, wonderful poet and firebrand. And I have to say, Devorah, I've been wanting to tell you, after the event for Jack at Washington Square, we went up to the rooftop of a friend for a little get together, and you had a friend with you who was just one of the most, I gotta say, beautiful looking women I've ever seen in my life. She just fascinated me. But you're pretty damn beautiful yourself. Devorah Major.
Thank you, Neely. Yeah, my friend since high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell her you said that. I don't know if her husband's going to be feeling it, but I'll tell her. I don't know how long I knew Jack. I actually was trying to rethink it because I know it was right around where my son, who just turned 40, was, but I don't know if it was before I got pregnant with him or after, but somewhere in then I met him at the African American Historical Society. And he has been a part of my poetry life, and he and Aggie of my life for decades, and it's been wonderful. I just want to share this poem that I wrote for him. I named it an Arcane in honor of his incredible, brilliant arcanes. Arcane for Jack Hirschman. On the day Jack died, there were words. Furious, faded, fecund, failing words poured from the poets, because they knew what Jack would do on such solemn occasions. He would write into the sunset, slit open the dawn right through the heat of the afternoon, as the moon secreted itself behind thick clouds. Inside the starless night, he would write. He would hold a person in his heart and embody their fulsome laugh, their once powerful stride, the rolling rhythms of their verse, the insistent uprisings in their soul. So they wrote their poems, and riots grew from the syllables, and the deepest of sadness rung inside the death. Personal and pervasive, the poems rocked and swam through salty tears as the poets gasped and didn't know what to do. Without their beacon who pointed towards change, without their alarm who demanded action. So they wrote as Jack did, around the planet in sun-scorched alleys and sandy ocean shores, as the fog pushed into evening, as the moon hovered over the night. They wrote to resurrect Jack, to have him live again and forever. They wrote his revolutionary love of humanity, compelling love of both his children, the one who breathes and the one who crossed over too soon. They wrote of his passionate love for his wife, his enduring love for the planet, his insatiable love for justice. What can we do? They cried and beat on their chest. Who will carry this flag? Who will drum these drums? Who will we argue with in debate? Who will show us how to be consumed by languages, decode their secrets and swallow their discord? In their fog of sadness they wrote, as Jack would do, they wrote. For always there was the word, seeped in compassion, praying for resolution, draped in color vibrations and sound symphonies. And then they waited for him to rise again. But it was the words that rose, that formed and reformed themselves, that rebelled and castigated, that soothed and surrounded, that melted and bubbled, that became sweet and harsh, vodka laced and tobacco spat, a history of words ambling in second line struts up Columbus Street, over Grant, perching on the corner near Cafe Trieste, lounging between blades of grass in Washington Square Park. Words were leaping and squabbling. They were shrieking and chanting. They were coughing on cobblestone streets in Berenice. They were aching in railroad tracks of Rome. They were chatting in London's upground. They were dancing Medellin. They were sobbing in Paris. Confused, they scrambled up steep staircases into overstuffed drawers, looking for a pen, a journal, a scrap of paper, a newspaper margin. The words were in rebellion and began to scream, to screech, to surrender, to serenade. Jack Hirschman presente. Jack Hirschman presente. Jack Hirschman presente. Thank you.
Indeed. Yes, Jack Hirschman presente. Thank you, Devorah, so much. So, the next reader is Gail Mitchell, and we've been friends for decades. I was honored to write a words, they call them blurbs, I say words, for a book of hers many years ago. She's an incredible poet. She called me when Jack died maybe 3 or 4 times and was just really overcome with what had taken place, and really was having trouble handling it. I was having trouble of my own. And so I'm very proud to have Gail here today.
It's okay to say it, Neely. I was sobbing. I could not understand why Neely had sent me a poem with end dates. I just couldn't understand it. I had just been with Jack at Specs when this book came out. So what? And I was sobbing. And Neely said, Gail, he was 87. He was lucid. He was writing right up to the day. And photographs of American history to be. Not a scrapbook for children. Not photos for polite company. These photos define America. Woman running down the road naked, napalm attack in Vietnam. From a book called The Movement, 3 men, 1 woman, a group lynching. White audience gathers ready for a Sunday picnic. Young man poses for the camera, his hands resting on the shoulders of his girlfriend. Eye gouged, beaten, thrown into the Tallahatchie River, a cotton gin fan around his neck. Photo of a young boy, barely 14, in his open casket. His mother dared to let America see what they had done to her boy, Emmett. Wounded knee, Me Lai, sow seeds of sorrow and regret. Embracing those feelings do nothing for me. They've been replaced with unspeakable rage. Still I speak them. We have witnessed your bloodlust, America. America, you cannot sink your sins deep enough to forget you are a bloodthirsty nation. We have seen your descendants, callous souls, unfettered by the deaths of other children dying in forced detention, mothers and fathers whose babies have been stolen. We have been broken down and remade, cast not in your image, America, but in our own. And these are the photos that help me to see you as you are.
How can you not on it?
No.
I don't know.
Thank you so
much. Here's the poem that I wrote in answer to. Neely wrote a poem that he sent to me, and I wrote him a poem back. And after I read it, he asked me to participate in this. It's okay, Steve. I'm right up there.
Okay.
People can hear me. It's okay.
Okay.
Don't relax. In answer to I Think, a poem for Jack Aaron Hirschman. I know what happened. Love was made. Blades of grass were woven into memories. Constitutions had no bearing on this beautiful soul. Bounties were spread. A cup of wine was poured, and we sang in many tongues. I know what happened. We saw each other across the room, and love was knitted into hearts and slips of paper with words too holy to utter, called us to the circle. We pulled out our hair and cried and held each other. There were no fallen, for each of us leaned against the other. I know what happened. Each of us lived out loud, told the truth, and loved boldly, reassured that this gift of an open heart was the wellspring that would heal all wounds and free us from what ails us. I know what happened. Whispers and tears were just leftover prayers. Sometimes grief is misunderstood, as is the ravings of a madman, each calling out to their own personal God, transcribing all they would ever know or become. Even their fingerprints dance, and mystery is just another critical blow to reality. I know what happened. Just as rings will turn your fingers green, others, if you rub them, will send you the most eloquent words, and you gather them in a basket as you would a babe left on the water. Yes, Aaron means exalted or strong or mountain of strength. It also gathers us to hear the message. I know what happened. The medium is this village that poured from our hearts. It is the soles of our feet, ever making the sacred pilgrimage, reminding us that a thin thread ties us all together. And we are humbled to have known such beauty, to witness the unmaking and become the poem. Generosity. Generosity. Jack and Neely have been so generous with me. Once Hector Almada was coming to the mission, and Neely and Jack asked if I could read. And the guy let me read, and he said, well, I didn't know if you were going to be able to carry your stuff, but you did good. It was a poem for Jack. It was a poem for Bob Kaufman. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail, for your words. So is Alejandro with us?
I think for the time being, we should move on to the next person, and I'll keep an eye out for Alejandro if he joins at the tail end.
So the next reader is a former poet laureate of Los Angeles. He's the founder of Tia Chucha Press many decades ago. We traveled with a group of poets to Germany and Austria in the early 90s. And he is a poet, novelist, memoir writer, and short story writer, so many things, a great activist. He ran for governor of the state. He's a very, in my opinion, a very brave person. And you talk about generosity. And it's just been so long since I've been able to spend any time with him. The author of the great, I believe his first poetry collection, The Concrete River, Luis Rodriguez.
Hello, everyone. What a great date it is. I had to say a few things. People know I do have, like Neely said, 16 books. Me and my wife started 20 years ago, a culture center, a bookstore that is now 3 times bigger than it was in our last place. And it's growing. We have 10 kids staff. It's kind of based on City Lights. It's based on the Guild Books in Chicago. It's based on all these ideas of people creating spaces. And against all odds, it's moving, it's going great. But I say that to say, none of that would have happened without Jack.
Oh,
and to me, that's important because I came out of a war zone. And a war zone wasn't in El Salvador, Mexico, or Guatemala. Those were war zones.
Yeah.
Came out of East LA. There was a war zone in the 60s and 70s that has continued. I lost 25 friends by the time I was 18. They died by bullets. 4 of them were killed by police. They died by heroin. They died by suicide. I came out of a lot of rage and hate. I was on murder's row when I was 16. I was arrested for attempted murder at 17. I was homeless for 3 years. I was on heroin for 7 years. The poets and the communists saved me. You understand what I'm saying? They came to my neighborhood, my poor little crazy ass neighborhood that nobody cared about, nobody knew about, nobody wanted to care about nothing. and yet they came and found me. And in my early 20s, I was fortunate to meet Jack, who came to Los Angeles to read at a rundown little center in East LA with all these radicals, revolutionaries from all over LA, from Watts, from the West Side, from East Side, from San Fernando Valley, everywhere, coming together and probably other places. And Jack was reading. And I heard Jack's voice and I heard his words, and it changed my life.
Oh, wow.
It made me think I could be in a war and I don't have to have a gun. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You have to have a bomb. But my words could be bombs, and my words could be the kind of cutting edge swords that could change things, that could bring peace and love and caring. That's what Jack was about. Because, you know, he was a communist, and I became a communist because of people like Jack. And I get it. There's some communists that are a-holes. There's some messed up people who claim to be communists. But there's a lot of great human beings. Some of the best human beings I ever met were communists, you understand? And Jack was the one on top. Jack stood true to his, the revolution, to change, to the poor, to the working class, to the homeless. He stood true to poetry. And to me, that's what I loved about Jack, the intertwine of his poetry, of his spiritual, because he was a very spiritual man, but also of his politics. He knew what he was in this world to do. And that's what I want to honor. I want to read two poems. And this is my last poetry book, Barred Bones. And I used to be part of a lot of communist organizations that Jack was a part of, which I was honored to say. I was the editor of People's Tribune. He used to pass out People's Tribunes everywhere. That was the thing. But I gave up all that stuff, by the way, not because I don't believe in the essence of the revolution or the ideas. I just have a hard time with people who can't align their politics with their humanity. I just have a hard time with that. And there's people that claim, like I said, claim to be revolutionary communists who can't do that. I'm moving forward, and guess what? Jack moved with me. He could have said, I don't want nothing to do with you. You're not part of this group anymore. He never did. He hugged me, he embraced me, he says, do what you got to do, I'm with you. Because Jack understood something deeper about what revolution is. It's not an icon, it's not an edifice. You know what I mean? It's not even a flag. It's people struggling, as was brought up, I think, earlier, for that common good in every one of us, the shared well-being of everyone. That's what it is. I don't care what you call it. If you're for that, I'm with you, you understand? And that's the struggle. And that's one thing that I want to be part of. So I'm going to read you a poem that he actually liked. I read this poem in San Francisco, one of the last times that I actually saw him. And he came up to me and he says, I really like the poem. He'll do that if he really does. I don't think he'll say that if he doesn't. And it's called When a Poet Appears. And it goes like this. When a poet appears, the earth springs into song, flowered with new hope, a bright beginning even from a terribly seeded past, where dust and stones are a bare sowing ground. Poets know there's a design to their lives, braided with threads of the future. They don't just make and remake language, they are called to it, just as a solid and direct line can become fleeting or slanted. Aspiring to be a poet, you become a poet, turning what's possible into what's next. Not just creating a nest for oneself, made of familiar sounds that keep one comfortable, not just basking in the spotlight or the imagined power, but by cultivating words with courage, discipline, ferocity. Poetry carries this sacrifice with grace. Always remember the unrecoverable moments with loved ones, with family, while also giving to the whole, even at the expense of one's time, one's considerations. All proper sacrifices are rooted in the sacred. Blessed and cursed, loved and hated, seen well or lied about. No poet can escape the human energies that both destroy and lift up. Yet true poets are matched for this challenge. There is a poet seed planted before birth and carefully nurtured by angels, by elements, by the alignments of universal sway. You feel this in the bones. Somewhere the message is, I was meant to be here. The fact is, poetry is in everyone and emerges from the human sea. Yet as deeper truths go, poets see farther and feel deeper. Just like the rest of us, only maybe more. turning time into learning, into passion, into revelation. They bargained with God for how to be in this world, learning for learning, passion for passion, revelation for revelation. So I want to now share a poem I wrote for Jack. His death, of course, is heartbreaking. But you know, as somebody says, there's enough tears in this world, and I'll cry them. We need both tears, and we need to keep moving forward. We need to organize. We need to have strategy. We need to come together. And so I'm good for the tears, but I'm also good for what are we going to do next? And Jack was like that. And I think Jack would understand. So what I'm going to do is read you a poem I wrote, Ode to Jack Hirschman. Thank you, Neely, again, for inviting me, for struggling to make sure I could be here. I thank you, Brooklyn Rail. Thank you all your voices. I'm going to end with this for Jack. And just want to say that we need more Jacks in the world. If anything, Jack is still with us, but we need more Jacks. We need more like that generosity, that big heart, that great spiritual minded person, that beautiful soul, that beautiful poet, that beautiful communist. We need more like that. Ode to Jack. Jack persisted, insisted, consisted. He was a revolutionary from the marrow. Inside his large stature lived a great heart, a great mind, a powerfully unique genius. His face and heart were aligned. What you saw is what you got with Jack, never a false note. Even his silences were poetic. Jack's eyes looked wary, but always joyful. He rejoiced in the small things most of us ignored. Yet he relished big concepts, big projects, the language that carried big imaginations. I met Jack in my early 20s. He was in his 40s. He wore a disheveled coat, blonde hair across shoulders, centered on his crusted face, a mustache of an old bard of embattlements. Jack thundered out his poetry, shaking pillar and pew inside a crumbling hall like a riveter of words. I myself worked in steel mills and foundries. Nobody sang my labor agonies and heartaches like Jack. Jack kept doors open in the seemingly closed circle of poets and almost secret society. He made accessible for everyone. Jack saw the street in me, but also the sweep of imagery and refrain I'd gathered from dirt and pavement. He became the guidance friend and guide to many, many poets. For me, he was my father, my poetry father, raising an irate son from the depths of work, jails, and drugs so that I could create music of the mills, a menagerie of muses. Jack plucked from muddy ground the tattered flag of the storied revolutionaries of our time. As US imperial forces and the weight of fear, blindness, compromise, or narrow mindsets destroyed or mutated radical edifices. No end was the end, every end an initiation. From Jack, I flew high that banner in my lyrics and lectures. Go forward, leave what is deadening behind, move on with what's blood-filled and daring. Jack, my friend, my mentor, my comrade, he was always beginning.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Luis. Thank you, everybody. Thank you once again to Malvika and the great staff of the Brooklyn Rail. Not only, by the way, for the Zooms, for shedding so much light on the art world, for always having poetry featured in the Rail, every damn issue, you know, so many poets from so many backgrounds, right there with the big art scene of New York and Enbrones, is that how you say it? It's just been a great pleasure. Malvika, it's a wonderful pleasure working for you. I think we have some photos to show. Is that correct? From
yes,
Steve?
we do.
Yeah.
And Neely, thank you so much. This event has been a blessing, and it's a privilege to call you a friend and call you up on the phone. Everyone, this has been so amazing and so remarkable. I've been writing down so many little lines. It's just truly, truly beautiful. I wanted to share one comment in the chat from Bill Nevins, who writes, been choking back the weeping since Jack split, but hell, he would have raised a glass and laughed to see such sorrow, yet he would also understand, sobbing the barricades, fixing bayonets to face the other line. Luis in the chat earlier wrote sob and organize. Tears are vital as well to our fire. And I truly love that, both as a rallying cry and as a sentiment in remembering. We do have some beautiful images lined up, and these came, let's see. Yeah, so these are a combination. They came from
England.
Agneta, they came from Celia, one of them, and then many of them are part of a beautiful photo essay that Stephen Wright was so generous to put together for us. So now I'll turn my microphone off, and I'm hoping, Agneta, you can tell us about this photo.
They're from our place in England where we used to go every year. And that's all. Many years ago, as you can see, we were both very young then. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. What year was this? Do you have an idea?
This was probably, I can't remember exactly the year. It was in probably late 90s, yes. Yeah. Hebden Bridge, yeah. In West Yorkshire, which was part of Ted Hughes, Jack actually did a stint up at Land Bank, the Irving Foundation. Hebden Bridge, yeah. Next.
Well, I put it first because it's so blissful. It really looks like kind of portrait of...
It was very blissful. Thank you, Malvika.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This one's from Celia.
Wow.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah. When did you take this photo?
I took this photo in 2000, maybe 2013. I had invited Jack to come with me to a Bjork concert, who I was working with. And we were standing outside. It was right on the ocean.
Yeah.
I took this photograph, which, it's all Jack. That is all Jack. It's the hat, it's the red scarf. And I just wanted to say something that I was reminded of. A few months before he passed, maybe 6 or 8 months, I would go visit him every few weeks in San Francisco. And he said to me, somewhere in the conversation, he said, now, Celia, I won't always be here. And at first I was like, huh? Because Jack embodied being here. It was very difficult to contemplate. And he said, I just want you to know that I'm always with you in my heart. And that is how I felt with him always, that after he passed, when he passed and the shock had gone away, it was just a big, warm smile, always and forever. So, so I thought you would enjoy this photograph.
Wow.
It was really beautiful. I mean, I also was thinking, you say this is so quintessentially Jack, and I was thinking about what a privilege it is to have, to know about all the gestures and postures and accoutrements and scarves of our living poets.
Yeah, he was fond of the red scarf.
Yeah.
That was his signature.
It's a good thing to have a signature.
Yes.
These are Aggie's again. Aggie, will you place us? When is this? Where is it?
I found this recently. I was astounded myself. It's Jack as a young professor. I mean, he was in his 20s, I guess.
Yeah.
And he looks very active. You can tell he's actually wanting to say something with great energy to his students. Yeah. I think it's a lovely photo of him. It's kind of ready to leap. Yeah.
Jack was a beloved professor. He was voted most beloved professor at UCLA, in fact.
Yeah, the same year he was fired.
Yeah, yeah.
Do those two go together?
Good combination.
A bit, yeah.
A bit. All right. And I want to just say, I'm going to open up the security settings a little bit so that anyone can turn on your microphone if you have, a story or a comment you'd like to make. Be polite, be kind. Let's move forward. And this is your wedding day?
Yes, 97. Was it? 98? I can't remember. Oh my God. Yes, it was our wedding day. It was at Matt Gonzalez's place, and Jack had just been poured into that suit. It was a borrowed suit from a colleague of Matt's. Yeah. And he's cutting the wedding cake. Looks
Here
very
we have this image again.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's Jack reading in Café Trieste many years ago. It's so Jack.
Yeah, this is such an expressive image.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And with the shirt, so bohemian.
The shirt actually was from India. It's from a friend who brought it back. He got these lovely silk shirts, and it's, yeah, I think he looked rather gorgeous in it. Yeah. And now I just love that photograph of Lawrence and Jack. There were many taken like that, but it's just the smile on Jack's face, the warmth that he emanates. It's so Jack, so beautiful. Yeah.
It was very interesting going through the images you sent to us at the Rail for this event, because right before them were the images that you sent for the Ferlinghetti tribute as well.
That's right.
So I pulled this one from that.
Nice photo.
Lovely. I love that one. That's in Café Trieste too. I think that's so beautiful.
I'll never forget what Neely said in the tribute to Ferlinghetti. He said Ferlinghetti knew deeply how to be friends.
Yeah.
It's like muscularly what it is to be a friend.
Yeah.
It seems so true.
Yeah.
Of your entire circle. Do you have any idea what they're reading here?
I think Jack is actually reading the poem he wrote to Lawrence. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
And then you sent two of these.
Yes, that was, work he did in the last year, artwork. So I just pulled two out of that series. There are altogether, I think, 9 of them, or 10. Yeah.
And
then it
text
was
just
little
came
haikus.
from...
Yeah, little haikus there.
Can I request you to read it for us?
Well, I can't see. Let me see. Can you read it? Can you see?
Sure.
75 years ago, peace was born, dead in the womb of all living thing. Yeah.
The next one.
A pun went in search of 2 ears on the same side of a face. Find one. That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah.
There we find our joke.
Yes. And that's his very last painting.
Oh, wow.
Which was at the Foreign Cinema.
Yeah.
In fact, it was the same week as he passed. And that was the very last reading. He did also read a poem there. But yeah, that was died the same week as he passed.
I think these enter into Steve's photos.
Hi, Malvika.
Hi. Yes.
I want to thank you for letting me share these images, and thanks to the Brook and Rail for all this. Is just absolutely amazing. This I picked this first image as the first one because it just showed his confidence and strength. I always loved Jack's generosity. He just had a magnificent heart. I used to refer to Jack when I was talking to other people as Mahatma Jack. I never addressed him that way. But as you probably know, Mahatma means great soul. And I used to think of him that way. But in addition to his wonderful generosity, he just exuded strength and confidence. And that's why I picked this one as the first photo, because it just showed how grounded and his strength and confidence. So I thought, contrasting to his wonderful heart, it didn't matter whether you were a celebrity or a homeless person. He was just open to everyone. Anyway, that's why I picked this one as the first photo. This was taken at in the late '90s at Place Pigalle. It was a celebration of Jewish poets. I don't remember the exact year, but it was in the late '90s. And these are the next ones. These are all taken at Koret Auditorium on April 4th during his inaugural address, having been appointed poet laureate. So that some audience shots and some at the podium.
Oh, wow.
I loved his smile. He just always had this just incredible magnetic smile. Everything lit up when he smiled. There he is with, I don't know who the lady is. I know that's obviously Jack Foley, just in the reception, meeting with people. I unfortunately don't know who the lady is in the photo as well, but I think in the background it looks like it's Bob Booker, but
yeah.
But this one was especially fun and somewhat naughty.
Yeah.
To be in a proper reading and to be turning back, making remarks.
Yeah. Some joking around.
Devorah.
And there are a couple of these at the podium.
Continuing the Ferlinghetti.
This was at this I think is also at the reception, same day.
So sweet. No, I will say for me.
Could you go back to the other one?
Sure.
Yeah, this one. When people, I remember one of the things I always remembered when he was speaking and people were applauding, he would always applaud with them. I guess made me feel to remind people that he was a part of the audience as well. Taking the spotlight out of the ego part of it. He always did that when people were applauding. I seem to remember that. This is at North Beach. This was the North Beach Festival at the Poetry Stage Bob Booker organized this. He actually created that from 1996 to 2000. This was in 1998. It was the 44th annual North Beach Festival, and it was dedicated to poet and painter Jack Michelin, who had passed earlier that year, and Jack was the featured poet. Yeah, all of these were from the North Beach Fair that year. This, we did a benefit for the Haight-Ashbury Literary Journal at All Saints Episcopal Church. And this one was approximately September 15th, somewhere between the 15th and the 24th in 2006. And Jack was reading there. So was Devorah and Trong Tran, Clara Sue. And Matt Gonzalez was the MC for this particular event. Now these were taken also the late 90s. I don't remember the exact day, but this was at the Brainwash Cafe. In the late 90s. It was a combination laundromat, poetry reading, and cafe. And it was interesting. They were able to feature a lot of well-known poets, and you could also get on the open mic if you got there early enough. I think this is probably back from this close-up was from the North Beach Fair. Now this, I want to say a couple of things about the next few photos. And I'm pretty sure this was on the same day as his inaugural address. I had followed Jack to the Trieste. That's Jack and Cush, who's a very well-known archivist documenting the poetry scene for many years before I started doing it. But what's interesting about so there's Cush and Stephen Kushner, that's his name, also known as Cush. They are talking about something at the Trieste. And so Jack was, other people I guess were following other people I guess were following and celebrating with him also, and he was talking to other poets that had, followed the celebration to the Trieste, and he was, I guess, going over some poetry with this lady.
No, that's Kirsten.
That's who?
Kirsten Wedderhan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not. Thank you for clarifying that. Wasn't sure.
Can either of you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
them?
Kirsten is an extraordinary wood block artist, woodcut artist. I have several large things, and she was really the first person who Jack really survived some very, very lean years with the help of three incredible women. One was Kirsten, the second one was Sarah Menifee, and the third one is Aggie. Although theirs, as far as I know, theirs was a true and is a true partnership in that regard. And Kirsten was an incredible Spanish dancer and artist, and I don't know if she's still alive, but she lived in a house on Kearney, I think.
On Kearney, and she worked as a barmaid at the Keystone Corner, and
That's right.
she would get comps, and Jack and I would go as often as we could, and that's where we met Dexter Gordon and Max Roach when he came back from Europe. and Bobby Hutcherson when he was having a drug problem. But
Yeah.
Kirsten worked there and then later at a restaurant down closer to the docks. And yeah, she was definitely his savior for those years.
Yeah.
She did a beautiful carving of Bob Kaufman.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
I
famous. on
can't
the
go get
cover.
it off my wall, but it's so beautiful.
Yes. She's an amazing artist.
Thank you for letting us
Well,
know who she is.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
just did not know who that person was.
No
Thank you.
problem.
And this is so incredible because Celia, the way you told that story is so like a fable, like so like how your father wrote the book for you, and you told this story. Jack Hirschman lived by the grace of three women.
Absolutely. And he actually talks about it in his inaugural speech.
Oh, that's so lovely. I think this is the pleasure of having archival photos that no one has seen. We can go back and look through them and identify people. So
Yes.
keeping on going, everyone keep an eye on the crowd.
This one is Jack writing some notes, and again, the person with the video camera, that's Kush or Stephen Kushner at the Trieste.
Right. And Kirsten's to his right.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
Don't know the folks in this photo. Does anyone else?
Rosemary Mano.
Mano.
Yes.
Okay.
Dominic Angelami.
Ah, yes. Tom.
Tell us about them.
Rosemary Mano is a poet who lives in North Beach and was a very close friend of Jack's and myself and the whole community. Unfortunately, she's not very well at the moment, but here she looks perfectly healthy and
Vibrant.
Dominic Angelami is a filmmaker, also a close friend. They both live in North Beach. The third person I don't recognize. No.
How fantastic.
Now this is interesting. There's a little story.
Kristen, put her hand.
Yeah, there's a little story that happened that evening, and I don't remember who had the problems, but there was a dilemma. Someone had approached Jack because apparently a homeless person had taken their wallet.
Oh, right.
I don't remember who it was. I don't even know if this photo had anything to do with it, but someone's wallet was taken. And Jack approached the person who allegedly had taken the wallet, and he was basically trying to get the wallet back. The person wanted something like $40. Jack said something like, "Here's $5," and the wallet was returned. But I just remembered that was kind of a humorous negotiation. I'm really glad that the wallet was returned. I don't remember who it belonged to, but I remember somehow that happened, and that was that definitely happened this evening, because I don't think I was at the Trieste photographing Jack very much, other than either on the same day or near the same time as the inaugural address from the when he was appointed poet laureate.
And these are more group shots from that same night.
Yeah, same evening. Same evening.
Does anyone recognize any of these stylish people?
Tony Ryan is the one to the left of that picture. Yeah. The rest.
And he was the filmmaker?
No, that was Dominic Angelami. This is Tony Ryan, who still lives in North Beach, who is looking quite well there. He's not looking that well these days, unfortunately.
This picture was a long time ago.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
2006.
Doesn't feel
Oh.
like a long time
No,
ago.
it was
No, really?
Yes, I mean, I remember the clothes of
Got
Jack.
it.
Yeah.
But everyone looks so young is my takeaway.
Yeah, Tony Ryan looks fantastic then.
Yeah.
Everyone looks young.
yeah, 2006 was definitely yeah.
There's Rosemary Dominic again, and I know the guy, I forget his name.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Well,
Then
these
this was taken at the celebration of the Walt Whitman's 200th birthday.
Yeah.
That Neely hosted that event at Corrit Auditorium at the library. And this was taken at
Bird and Beckett.
At Bird and Beckett. It was the celebration of the book that was just edited by Neely. Where's my notes over here?
Up Kaufman.
No, it was the collected. Let me get my notes here. I'm sorry. Oh, here it is. Collected Poems of Bob Kaufman. They were celebrating that event, which is November 2019. City Lights Books was the publisher, and several people read. And these are photos of Jack at that event.
Such a jolly photo, though. And so recent. It's so sweet. I love the way he's holding the pen in his hand. And here we have a few more from that same event, correct?
Wonderful.
I love this one. I just love the feeling of Neely listening as Jack's reading. Just a really warm photo.
Yeah, lovely.
Oh, I didn't even recognize you, Neely.
No, you look so young, Neely.
Oh, Lisa, how do I get back on? I'm off.
You're here.
You're on now.
You're on.
I can't see anything on the screen.
Press escape.
I wanted to show when Steve's done, I want to show a poster that Kristen did with napkin art of many of the people of North Beach.
Do you have it with you now?
I have it now.
Let's
but
do it.
I don't know where. I have no way to show.
You
Can
can
you-
hold it up. And I'll
Oh, it's
spotlight
very
you.
large. I don't know.
Can
You
you
can
see?
show
I'll
a
spotlight
few
you
of them.
to everyone. Yeah, we see them. They're beautiful. Let's see.
But I can't see anything. So
That's all right. We can see it.
But that's okay. We can see
there's
perfectly.
Jack on that Jack Hirschman right here,
That's
Yeah.
lovely.
and Bob Kaufman. These are on napkins. These were by Kristen. There's only one copy of this left. I'm going to try and get copies made.
I got one somewhere.
Oh, you do? Oh, good Lord. There goes that. There's yours truly right there.
Gregory.
There's Kaufman. So she was an amazing artist, an amazing translator. She was a great person. She did die a few years ago.
No, she did not die.
Oh,
She did
whoops.
not. Jack told
She
me.
did not die, Neely, please. She's alive. She's outside San Francisco.
Knock on wood. Thank God. This is what I'd heard. So yeah,
Rumor, she did not die.
terrible.
G.E. Schwartz in the chat is asking for her surname.
Witterhan.
Wonderful.
Wetterman.
Brilliant. Everyone go
Just
pursue
type it
her
in.
work. She's
Wetterhan.
alive.
Yeah, no, I know she's alive. She's alive very well. So.
Well, I'm so glad to hear it and that she's in good health.
Look at it. Yeah.
Wait,
I'm going to just share we have a couple images left. And I found this very interesting, I think, while Steve is getting the phone.
Wow.
So here we have Neely, different haircut. And I loved this, a recent event that Steve attended right before the pandemic. And then an event that was thrown by Jack, I believe. But I think everyone here in the room can tell us more. During the pandemic. So this is a poetry event in the height. Yeah.
Yeah, this was at right. This was at Specs. I was so happy that Jack organized this live reading it was just refreshing to actually go to an important reading that was not a Zoom reading. Not that, you know, I mean, just as a difference for people to get together.
The celebration of the last anthology by the poet.
Right. Yes. Yes. The the building socialism to fighting fascism.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it was.
It had a carnation on the front cover. Yeah. I have a copy in here somewhere.
Yeah. Wait here.
These are beautiful images. How many of us in the room attended this event? I'm curious.
Well, I was there. I read at it. Yeah.
Gail read at this event also. Gail Mitchell.
Yeah.
I read it.
Devorah, certainly Devorah read.
Devorah was there.
So quite a few people.
Yeah.
So this is a photograph of a recent memory.
Yes, I'm sorry. This was this lady, a wonderful musician, did this original, performed this original song near the end. It was just beautiful. I'm really sorry I can't remember her name.
It's okay because this is how we'll find out her name.
Yeah.
And these are beautiful.
It's Jack reading.
Yes.
It's a beautiful image.
And that's Jack and Gail.
Yeah.
And this lovely piece of history, the stand with Chesa Boudin in the back. It's really, that and the masks really tells you where in history we were.
Right. Yeah.
And here we have, I think, our last image.
Yeah, this one was taken at during Kim Shuck's inaugural address at the main library at Court Auditorium when she was appointed the 7th Poet Laureate. And just such a beautiful smile. I just couldn't resist putting that on film.
It's beautiful. And I think, I'm so sorry to say that's the final one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They were truly, truly beautiful.
Thank you, everyone.
And really fantastic. Thank you all. I'm so impressed. So many hours in, we have so many people still together in the space.
Well, we're family. We're family. We're not apart. We haven't been apart for almost 50 years, a lot of us, and more. So we're here.
It's brilliant. So at this point, traditionally, we hand the microphone over to a publisher and the captain of this fine ship, Phong Bui. Unfortunately, he had to leave. He had another meeting that was starting, but he sends all his love to all of you and says that he can't wait to listen to today's reading and tribute while he draws his portraits later in the day for our upcoming issue. So he looks forward to being with us again through the magic of the internet. I want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Agneta, Tongo, who jumped in at the last moment and brought so much vibrancy to Andrei, to Celia, to Pierre. Oh goodness, Celia with your bedtime story. It's beautiful. I agree with Elaine that it should be published. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Elaine, Gail, Stephen again, Devorah, and Luis. And of course, thank you dearly, dear Neely, for all that you do and how beautifully you open these spaces for us. And make them feel so like home. As always, we'll share the recording of today's reading on our YouTube archives, so it'll be available in a day or two if ever you'd like to revisit this magical space. And we do this every day here at The Rail, so please join us again tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific for our 6th Publishing in Transit. It's a monthly series celebrating literary editors and organizations and all the vital work they do behind the scenes. Tomorrow, we'll take a deep dive into Tamas, an intercultural organization focused on the worlds of arts, letters, and primarily translation. We'll be joined by founder Sarah Riggs, Franco-Egyptian poet and filmmaker Safa Fatih, and poet, teacher, and literary translator Alicia Mascarenas. They'll be joined, of course, by series curator Cole Swenson. That will be at 12 p.m. Eastern, right here in the Zoom. But other than that, thank you all so much. And I'll invite you to turn on your microphones, so you can say hello to each other, goodbye on your way out, or anything else you'd like to share. But this has been truly, truly special. Thank you so much.
Malvika?
Yes, Neely.
Very, very good.
Thank you, Malvika.
Thank
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I have
Thanks
to
so
go, but
much.
thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Here we
much.
have everyone in the rail
Steve.
office.
Hey.
Thank you.
Thank
Neely. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Keep a seat for me there. Make a seat for me.
All right, we'll keep your seat warm until you get here.
All right.
Yeah, I want to thank Steve Wilson. Steve, thank you so much for those great photos.
Thank you.
Do a big exhibit of your work. It's just astounding work. Thank you so much.
Thanks for those
Steve
kind words.
did a beautiful job.
Be in touch.
Steve-
Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you,
Neely.
Susie.
I'm unmuted.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Love you, Aggie.
Everyone have a beautiful lunch. See you
Bye.
Good
later.
job. Goodbye.
Love and courage.
Hey, Billy.